You guys ready?
Okay, welcome to the November 27th, 2023 regular meeting of the Ann Arbor District Library Board of Trustees. Have we taken attendance?
Yes, I have.
Thank you, Eli. May I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, any discussion on the agenda? All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? The agenda has passed. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the consent agenda? Okay, all in favor of approval of the consent agenda, say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Hearing no one, the consent agenda is approved. And moving on to citizens' comments. Have we received?
We have not received any at this point.
Okay. So seeing nobody for citizens' comments, we will move right along to the financial reports from Eli.
Okay. Financial report begins on the page marked 27 in your packet. Just to pull out a couple of highlights. So our total receipts through October 31st is $19.6 million. That's 97.3% of budget, about right where we expect to be this time of year. Our general fund balance is $8.2 million as of October 31st. That's your undesignated fund balance. That would fund approximately 5 months of operations. Moving on to the next page there, our revenues so far this year, this is our accrued revenues, $6.9 million. That's 33.8% of budget after 33.3% of the fiscal year. And our year-to-date expenditures are $6.5 million, so that's 31.6% of budget. And that puts us revenue minus expenditures at, to the good, $463,000 at this point in the year, which is a great place to be. And then just to skip ahead to page 31, statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes. Again, I'm looking at that last column at 33.3% through the year. What is over that? So you can see non-resident fees. We've done more of that than we expected, but we do budget fairly conservatively for that, and it is a very small number. But so far we've already hit 50% of our revenue budget for non-resident fees. If nothing else, it's good to see that our expansion of card eligibility hasn't affected our non-resident fees so far. Looking down the expense side, accounting and audit at 157%, as we mentioned, we will make an adjustment to that toward the end of the year. That is because we had a resignation in the accounts payable department. We've been using contract services for that. However, we do have a plan to discontinue use of contract services and have that work be done in-house starting in the new calendar year. So that will be coming up. Building rental, again, we had an error during our budget development, so we will be bringing a budget adjustment to that to square that up. Most likely taking that from capital outlay, but we'll talk more about that when we get closer. Going down a little bit further, legal expense, 55%. This was a year in which we negotiated, so there was some expense associated with that, and that will continue to fall most likely over the course of the rest of the year. Materials and library programming are both front-loaded because of large summer events, so that's what you would expect to see, those slightly above 33% at this time of the year. Postage, I think I mentioned last month about how we're making some changes to the way we handle some of our postage. It's a complicated thing with postage meters and all that kind of stuff, and we were not able to use some of our meters to be able to handle our homebound service, which mails out and then comes back on an unknown date. So you need to be able to send out unmetered or metered mail without a date on it. And that's something that is generally getting a little harder to do, so we're making some adjustments that result in a little bit more cost, but as you can see, overall, the total budget for that line is only $21,000, so not a large expense. Repairs and maintenance is running a little ahead. We'll see how things go as you get to the end of the year. It's easy to push things to the next year, so we'll see how that comes in as we get closer to the end of year adjustments. Software licenses and maintenance, again, is another front-loaded one, so that's right where we expect it to be. And there you can see down at the bottom, so far running a surplus of $463,000. One thing that I will mention is that after having received the audit report, which is coming up later into today's evening, we will be asking the board for a transfer of last year's surplus into the capital fund. Once the audit is complete and accepted, then we know exactly what the surplus was, and then in the new year we can ask and consider a move from the fund balance into the capital fund for future projects. Any questions? All right, that's financial report. Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to committee reports. So, for the executive committee, we met this evening before this meeting. We primarily discussed the logistics around replacing our vacancy on the board. One of our board members resigned at the last meeting, and we will be seeking to fill that seat for the term that runs through, begins in the early 2024 and runs through the end of 2024. So we will be inviting interested parties to send a letter of interest to board@aadl.org, which goes to all of the board members. So each board member will see every letter of interest from any interested party. The executive committee will then meet to review the applicants and come to the January board meeting with a recommendation, at which point the board will be able to discuss all the candidates And if any individual board members have feedback or input or questions about applicants before the meeting, to avoid any discussion of that, please contact me, the board president, in between now and then. And we're excited to see who in the community is interested in applying, and getting a new fresh board member in the new year. Did I miss anything?
I think you got it.
All right. Yep. And otherwise, we just discussed some items for our upcoming agendas in January and moving forward. So that is it from the executive committee. Do we have a report from the budget and finance committee?
Question
Yeah.
first.
Oh, sorry.
What's the application or the letter of interest deadline? Did you
Oh,
say that?
sorry. That's a very good question. The deadline would be the end of December.
Okay.
So before the end of the year, email board@aadl.org.
And then, so by December 31st, and then presumably then executive committee will meet before the
Yes.
next full board meeting. And is there anything in the process in terms of interviewing or board president outreach, or like in terms of receiving letters of interest and then vetting multiple candidates? Or inviting them to the meeting, which has been a thing that has happened in the past.
We hadn't talked about that.
Okay.
I mean, I'd be open to.
Yeah, we're open to feedback if you
Yeah.
have suggestions. Like, we know, I think some of us have had individual conversations with people in the community who are interested, so we know there is interest in filling the
Yeah.
seat. Yeah.
I was just curious, I mean, I know the school board had to do their own version of this, and that has been the most recent kind of memory of it happening publicly, and I don't know exactly what they did, not that we would necessarily replicate the process. I had found it strange when this had happened before on this board, to not necessarily hear from the person. And so you all might want to, or we all might want to think about what that looks like exactly.
Like aside from the letter.
Yeah. If there were a need for additional questions or, essentially, or it could be done in committee as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be done publicly in this meeting.
So, yeah, I think if we receive a number of applications and we're having a difficult time coming up with a recommendation, and as a
Yeah.
committee, that we would certainly seek to have further discussion with individual candidates. And it's entirely plausible that that'll be the case. And I do think we have enough time between now and near the end of January to do that.
I think I'd
Yeah.
recommend, probably I'd feel most comfortable just in terms of transparency of process, if I'm very happy for this to happen in committee and for a recommendation to be brought forward. I think in terms of process, that if you are able to narrow down, if there is a pool of more than, say, one person, which there probably will be, that if you can narrow it down to, say, 2 or 3 and speak to each of those candidates for 15 to 20 minutes by phone, and report back on that, and then we can help, that would inform and probably answer some of the questions that we might have about finalists.
Yeah, plus one to Jim. I'm unsure of how this would work procedurally, but I do think it would be good for us to have the more human touch, I suppose, to their applications. The letters are great. Their resumes will be great as well, but I would appreciate that too. And that's fine, again, if it happens in committee, but we'd just like to hear that come back as well.
And I don't necessarily think all of you need to talk to them. I think as president, Scott, it would
Yep.
be fine for you to outreach and report back. What I want to present to our public is that there was like a meaningful process in that and sort of in bringing that recommendation forward.
Sure. Yeah, I think we could definitely commit to
Okay.
having a in-person or over-the-phone conversation with at least 2, if not 3, candidates, depending on the pool. Yeah. Thanks for the suggestions.
Thank you. Thanks
Yeah.
for carrying this important work forward.
Any other questions or comments or thoughts on the process? Okay, thank you.
I had one more comment,
sure, yeah.
sorry. Full of comments today. I've also been in meetings since 1 o'clock, so the brain is barely functioning. I was just wondering about sort of public notice. I mean, I know as a matter of practice, we need to do that, at least on the website. Would be great if it made it around, say, through the Observer's like weekly online newsletter, just a little bit of like that local touch where people have eyes.
What we had discussed was
Yeah.
to both basically treat it the same way that we treat bid opportunities.
Yeah.
In that it would be a notice on the front page of the website, and we would also post on social as a
Great.
link to that.
Awesome.
That has been fairly successful in getting the word out in the past.
Great, okay, awesome, thank you.
Okay, assuming there's no other comments? All right. We got All right, so Budget and Finance Committee, do we have any report ahead of the auditor's report we'll be hearing shortly?
Just that we got a preview and more in-depth preview of the audit report, but I'll leave it to Alan to give us that information.
All right, thank you, Anna. So before we get to that, we have the library report from Eli.
Okay, thank you very much. So first, everyone has out their station today a new piece of library swag. This is just an AADL charger. The reason that we've gotten these is because it's become to the point where really providing these is kind of a basic necessity of human life at this point. And we got ones that were, you can say they're not terribly fancy, because they're inexpensive enough that we can give them away. So now when someone is looking for a charger, they can come to the desk and we will give them one. And they can plug into USB ports that are around the library or wherever else they find them. But I wanted each of you to have them, but these are now available at every library desk. Yeah.
How does it work? No, I'm so
You
sorry.
okay, this is universal.
I need this.
No.
I need this.
So you plug one end into the USB end into a USB power source, and then there's the 3 different types for different phones. So there's
get it now.
USB-C, and then there's micro US, whatever that is,
Okay.
and
Thank
then
you
there's
for
iPhone for Lightning. Thank you for asking. However, I will mention, since this is an iPhone-intense organization, the part of what makes them cheap is it's missing the circuitry that lets you plug it in one way or the other. So you will see the iPhone one has a side marked up. So if you plug it in the wrong way, just like any other USB part, flip it over if it doesn't work. So that's what keeps them
I'm
cheap.
old enough that I can get that part.
Okay.
The original, I was very lost. Thank you. for this
You're welcome.
tutorial.
Thank you for asking. Okay, so for our stat of the month this month, we looked at check-ins. You know, checkouts are a hard thing to measure because there's checkouts and then there's renewals. And we're required by the way that state aid stats are collected to include renewals in our checkouts. But when you allow unlimited renewals, that can make it hard to know. However, there's no equivalent for check-ins. The check-ins really show us what the volume is across the organization. So what I've got here is just the slides to show our check-ins by branch from January through October. Just kind of see how that goes. Now, one thing you can see across all of this, Westgate has the most things returned. Pittsfield has the least, and downtown and Mallett's Creek and Traverwood tend to be lined up there in the middle. Also, Melcat is called out there. One thing that's interesting about Melcat, you'll see as we go through the months that it stays very steady. But Melcat, like, even though there's checked in at whatever location people return it to, then the work has to be done at the downtown library. So when you think about the throughput of the downtown workroom, you are really adding the Melcat number to the downtown number, and it's generally the busiest one. And also, Melcat transactions are the most time-consuming to do. So a lot of that is really happening at the downtown library with the book pros that work here in the downtown workroom. So one thing that's interesting is that as you advance over time, they really move pretty much together for the most part, showing that this trend pretty much stays the same across all of our locations with a few small changes. But you can also see that March is busy, April less busy, May about the same as April, then June starts to heat up, and then July comes and summer reading really has a lot of stuff being returned. And then in August, when people are on vacation, the profile changes. So you see people dropping things off more at other locations than where they visit. One thing we can't say enough, because patrons still ask all the time, You can return any AADL item to any AADL location, with the exception of oversized tools, which really need to be returned to the downtown library. And everything else really can go back to any location, and we'll move it around on the truck, and that makes things a lot easier for our patrons. Then you can see after summer ends, the numbers go back down and then start to climb a little bit more as we head into the summer. So it's just to kind of show how much that happens, but also to see, we're basically processing on the order of 100,000 items every month. So it's a very busy place, lots of stuff coming back. And this is all real. Every one of these things represents a book pro taking an item and scanning that one item and putting it on a cart. So that is a lot of work, a lot of that happening, and thank you to all of our book pros for continuing to make that happen. Okay, some upcoming events here. We've got a very interesting project going on coming up in early December in the lobby. We were approached by an artist who wanted to make a video about her experiences or their experiences looking at the collection and items that use the word Asia or Asian, and how that related to them and their experience of the collection. So they've made a video. There's going to be 3 screenings. The video is very short, but we'll have it on a loop 3 times on December 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and then on December 6th, we'll have a Q&A with the artist and a screening. So that'll be happening in the lobby. Very cool project that we were approached with, and very happy to make that happen. Tiny Expo's coming up on December 9th at the Downtown Library. We have largest number of vendors yet. I think we have 50 vendors, and it's going to be a big, wonderful show for everyone. Looking forward to that. Whopper, which is a Washtenaw area pickup robotics. That is a robotics competition for high school teams. Great for spectators, great for kids who wanted to know more about competitive robotics. And that's coming up Saturday, December 16th at the Plaza. And then our writing contests, I believe this is the 32nd year of our teen writing contest, It's All Right. So those begin taking submissions on January 8th with awards in March and April, if I recall correctly. So those are some upcoming events. Facility updates. We are recarpeting the kids area at Westgate. Here's a lovely photo from right when it opened, when everything was all fresh and new. We want to get back to that, but we will be removing the pops of color because the pops of color really show the stains. So it will be mostly a more business-like carpeting. We're also getting a lot of the furniture reupholstered. So starting on Tuesday the 5th, the kids area will be closed for recarpeting at Westgate for about 3 days. We will have some of the toys and some of the materials will be available in the West Side room so that parents who show up, there is signage that will be going up to say that it's closing. We'll be talking to the website so we can disappoint as few patrons as possible. But and we'll be moving some of the iPads into the Westgate room as well. So we will have some opportunities for kids to have the experience that they're used to. Several of these pieces of furniture that you can see in the picture have been reupholstered. We're moving from kind of the vinyl treatments, which hasn't really held up, to more fabric. And there have been, we calculated, well over 2 million visits to Westgate Branch since it opened in 2016. And just looking at the past 30 days, there are over 40,000 visits to Westgate just in the past 40 days. So a very busy place, and not surprising that it is time for new carpet after just 7 years. Okay. AADL in the community. Fifth Avenue Press was honored at a reception at the Strand Bookstore in New York City in October for making the shortlist of the Alice, an award given annually to the best richly illustrated book that makes a valuable contribution to its field and demonstrates high standards of production. Representing AADL and Fifth Avenue Press was designer Nate Posky Morrison, pictured with the author Frank Yulee. And we were delighted about this because this was a design award, and Nate was the designer of this book. And it just turned out beautifully. It's a really great book and a wonderful partnership with the University of Michigan Press. So that was a great partnership, and we're looking forward to more of them to come.
Is that the Ann Arbor Film Festival book?
Yes, it is a history of the Ann Arbor Film Festival. Cinema Ann Arbor is the name of the book. All right, AADL in the community. Just this past weekend, we had our winter coat swap event. We had 146 attendees, many of whom left with multiple items. We've been collecting winter coats for more than a month leading up to the event. Lots of people donate a lot of coats. And this model of a swap is something we're doing more and more. We've had some art supply swaps. We've had some puzzle swaps. We've had a gender-affirming clothing swap. All kinds of different ways that are part of the circular economy, as they're calling it, and ways that really turn into very good library programs. All we really do is say, come, leave some stuff and take some stuff, and it works out really well. So expect to see more of those in the future. The 2024 Washtenaw Read has been chosen. The book will be How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. It's a New York Times bestseller. Smith starts in his hometown of New Orleans, leading readers through a tour of monuments and landmarks that offer an intergenerational story of how slavery has been central in shaping our nation's collective history and ourselves. Copies are available at all branches. Unfortunately, this year we won't be able to bring Mr. Smith to speak at the Washtenaw Reads event. AADL sponsors that Washtenaw Read talk solely, and he's enjoyed a level of success, puts him a little outside of our range. So this is not, so we will be finding another speaker to come have a wonderful event about this book. It's mostly because we really only get about 200 or 300 attendees for this event, and it's just not on a scale where it makes sense for a $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 investment. So that will be the talk for AADL in the community. And our staff spotlight for this month. Emily Howard is a library tech in the events department. She's worked here for 6 years. What do you wish people you worked with knew about you? I started at AADL as a desk clerk and have been working on the events team since November of 2017. When I decided to leave academia for nonprofit work, I could not have imagined that I'd end up working on events at a public library, but it was a serendipitous turn of events. My job mostly involves organizing a large volume of events information so that several departments can collaborate to bring library events to the public. I also work on booking rooms for the public via community partnerships and rentals and reservations. Events work can be rigorous, but it also offers amazing opportunities for fun and community connections. I'm also proud to have recently become co-president of the Ann Arbor District Library Associates. I am grateful for the opportunity to serve the public through my work in events and to serve my coworkers through our union. My very favorite, I can't believe I get paid to do this part of my job, is designing and hosting bookbinding events. You should come to one. And here's a wonderful photo of Emily with Hikonyan, who is visiting us from our sister city in Japan. Thank you to Emily. So our mention of the month from Coco Vance on Instagram. The Ann Arbor District Library has a seed sampler program. I picked up these 7 packets up today. Each variety needs cold stratification, meaning that they should be planted this fall. I heart AADL Graham. Our fall seed sampler program, Great Lakes Native Plant Bundle, launched earlier in the month, offering 7 varieties of local flowers, from milkweed to coneflower and wild bergamot. Some great monarch flowers here, definitely the milkweed and the butterfly weed as well. And Marissa, who works on this program, is with us today. So she's one of the people who's helped instigate and has worked on this program from its beginning. So thank you, Marissa.
She's also the best. Just saying. Shout out.
Compliment of the month. The library is one of the best reasons to live in Ann Arbor. Your unsung heroes. Well, we're singing it tonight. So desk interaction at Pittsfield from October. And here's a complaint of the month. Cafe Pronto coffee vending machine is out of order again. A technician came downtown twice this week to service it, including this morning. Its touchscreen is again completely unresponsive. Multiple patrons over the past several days have complained to desk staff about it being out of order. So our vending vendor has changed hands and quality is crashing quickly. So we are likely to have to find a new vending vendor, and that it will not be a fast-moving process. So this is something that a lot of patrons value about the libraries. This is very inexpensive snacks and drinks, and it's something that has been hard for us to keep running recently. So you might hear about that, so we wanted to give you a heads up that we are working on it. And that's my report. Any questions?
With Clint Smith, would you, if there was a way to sort of negotiate on the fee, would you want him to come?
Sure.
Still, yeah.
I think there was a lot. I mean, we typically spend $8,000 to $10,000 on our biggest speakers. So it's just a very big gap. And also someone who, rightfully so, has a bureau, and the bureau needs to get paid. And so it's complicated to get any sort of movement on those types of things.
I have an idea.
Okay.
I was wondering too about a co-sponsorship potentially, because I know he seems like he'd be of interest to a large chunk of the university audience. Okay.
Happy to talk about it.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I just like working with speakers bureaus is too complicated.
Yeah.
I should not say that on the public record. I'll never get a job again. But okay.
All right, moving on to new business. So the first item we have is the auditor's report. We have Alan Panter from Yo and Yo.
All right.
Welcome, thanks.
Thank you. Good evening. Hello, my name is Alan Panter. I'm a partner at Yo and Yo, and I'm here to present the audit. The materials that I've passed out are there's 3 things that I passed out. There are two bound documents. The larger one is the audited financial statements. The smaller bound document is my presentation for this evening. This is what I plan on following once I get done introducing these things. And also there's a stapled letter, and I call this the governance letter. So these are all the materials that we have distributed. And Eli, I have a couple of extras here.
Sure. Thank you very much.
It's for you guys. All right. So the audit went fine. There were a few difficulties that we encountered. We did receive a significant number of journal entries after we received the trial balance, which causes multiple issues with us. And also the implementation of a new accounting standard. So there was a new accounting standard this year that was effective, and we assisted the library in the implementation of that accounting standard as well. But it's all done now. The audit has been issued final, and we're here well, this is when I was here last year, so pretty normal timeline in terms of presentation of the audit. So a lot goes into preparing for an audit, closing the books, pulling all the support, working with us, and all that. So we'd really like to thank everybody that we worked with at the library. That would be particularly Cindy Richmond and Eli for all the assistance. We'd like to thank them for all the assistance that we received, so thank you very much. Our audit includes an examination of the financial reporting process, internal controls, and also certain aspects of legal compliance. So those are things that we just do as a matter of course with all governmental audits. This year, based on that consideration, we do have one management letter comment to discuss, and I'll talk about that when I get to the governance letter at the back of my slide. So my plan for this evening is to give you some key takeaways from the audit and also to answer any questions that you might have. So please interrupt me with those at any time. As Anna stated, we did have an in-depth discussion of this report. We literally went through it page by page with the Finance Committee, so I do not plan on taking up a ton of your time with this tonight, giving you a lot of detail. So in the presentation, the first page deals with the independent auditor's report. The purpose of an audit is to give you an opinion on your financial statements, not to give assurance on internal control, and not to detect fraud. So this page represents our opinion on your financial statements. We're giving what's called an unmodified or clean opinion. That is the best opinion you can get. And it means a couple of things. It means, first of all, the statements are formatted in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So in other words, everything that's supposed to be in the statements is there. And also based on the procedures that we perform, the numbers are good. So unmodified opinion is definitely what you want to see. Okay. The next page is the balance sheet, governmental funds balance sheet. This is a snapshot, a picture as of a point in time as of June 30th, 2023. This shows all of the funds of the library, and I'd like to focus on the general fund as the primary operating fund of the library. So let's talk about fund balance. So in the left-hand column, third number up from the bottom, is your unassigned fund balance. It's just over $8 million, $8,030,394. You can see that the fund balance is broken down into a few different categories. There's non-spendable, so that represents items that benefit a future period. So that would be like prepaid insurance or rent or those kinds of things that are paid before the end of the year that benefit the upcoming fiscal year. There's permanent corpus, so that's amounts that you've received in your endowments. There's the expendable portion of your endowments is there. There's the amount that's committed to capital improvements, so that's the amount that's available in your capital projects fund. And then there's the unassigned that we talked about. So that's kind of the number I want to key on, is that 8 million unassigned. So we measure the adequacy of fund balance as a percentage of annual expenditures. So how much do we have? How much should we have? How does that compare to historical norms? Ann Arbor District Library is at about 46% of annual expenditures. Last year was about 25%. So there's a sizable increase in the fund balance this year, and we'll talk more about that on the next page. We usually recommend a minimum of 15 to 20% just for straight operations and cash flow. So the library is in the fortunate position of being above that minimum target. And it's also important to note that the library levies its property taxes on July 1st every year, so the June 30th financial statements is pretty much the low point of the year in terms of your cash flow. I heard Eli mention during the financial report that you had collected about 97% of your receipts for the year, and that makes sense to me with a summer tax levy. So you would have already collected that at this point, so, or at least most of it. So, okay, next page is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So this shows how fund balance changed during the year. The column format is the same. And again, I'd like to focus on the general fund. So again, left-hand column, third number up from the bottom, net change in fund balance in the general fund, $2,587,407. So that's the amount that the fund balance increased this year in the general fund. How did we get there? Total revenues in the general fund, $19,849,165. That's up about $1.5 million from last year, about 8%. Most of that is property taxes, which went up about $1 million due to the increases in taxable value in the district. Millage rates actually rolled down fractionally due to the Hadley reduction. The other item is positive interest income. So you can see that there's interest income there of about $107,000. Last year that was a negative. So that flip of a negative interest income to a positive definitely moves the needle in terms of your revenue year over year. On the expenditure side, total expenditures $17,314,772. That is up about $336,000, about 2%. When I went through there, I didn't really see a very clear trend that explains the increase, other than about $270,000 of increased library programming. So you guys are continuing to conduct those programs, and you spent more on it this year. All right, so I have a couple of graphs, and then I'm almost done. So the next page is a 5-year comparison of, and this is the general fund, revenues, expenditures, and resulting fund balance. So you can see that revenues are up this year after having been fairly flat the last 3 years. Expenditures were down this year and pretty comparable to each year except 2022. So you can see the expenditures, if you kind of look at it, kind of exclude 2022, they're in sort of a range there. So this year's expenditures are very comparable to 2020. The spike in expenditures last year was due to capital spending. So that was a big transfer that was made to the capital projects fund. That was last year. And then fund balance is, of course, up this year after dipping last year. So, all right, the next page just talks about revenues. And this is a 5-year graph of the library's revenues. What we did here is we took the single largest source of revenue, which is property taxes, and we plotted that out for each year, and then we aggregated everything else in the other. So it kind of shows you what you already know, which is, but it kind of shows it graphically here of how much the property taxes are in relation to the other revenue sources. The other revenue sources are really pretty minor in comparison to the property taxes, is kind of the point of this. All right, and you can see a nice upward trend of your property taxes there. Next graph is on the expenditure side. Same concept as the revenue graph, except we drilled down a little bit farther into, we took the largest 3 cost categories. So personnel, that's clearly the largest cost center. You can see that it generally goes up, except you had the anomalous 2021, which it was flat from 2020 due to COVID. Purchase services, you can see that's fairly flat over a 5-year period. Materials and supplies, that is in a fairly narrow range. And then the big spike there is that transfer that happened last year. All right, and the last page I have for you deals with the governance letter. So the governance letter, and that's the stapled letter that I passed out, that is a required communication that we issue with every audit. It is addressed to management and the Board of Trustees. Most of the letter is a form letter, but it communicates several important issues that are related to the audit. The letter discloses any estimates that are used in preparing the financial statements, any new accounting standards, which I mentioned that there was one. It has some informational items. It discusses any difficulties or disagreements that we had, which we have none. Any misstatements we noted, and we didn't have any of those. And if we had any management letter comments, those would be there as well, or internal control issues. And as I mentioned before, we do have one management letter comment. So the management letter comment that we have has to do with year-end adjustments and the fact that, as I said before, I might have said the number, but we did receive 18 journal entries after we got the trial balance. So that creates a little bit of a moving target for us. And it also creates an environment where we're kind of puzzling through things with management and the accounting staff as we're doing them, as opposed to having it all kind of done and handed to us. So that's what happens with that. Plus, when you have 18 journal entries, you have to go back and make sure they're all posted right. You have to make sure they're in agreement with the library's books, and it really just makes the whole process a lot more difficult. So, and it's also an indication that, you know, the library probably wasn't fully prepared for us when we got here. So that's another thing that I want to kind of add on to that. So we're recommending that the library get those adjustments made before we arrive for the audit in the future. And I know that your finance director is committed to doing that. I've had that discussion with her, and I know that she made that commitment at the finance committee meeting too. So if you have any questions, that's all I have.
I want to be clear that I mean this as a neutral question. I remember very vividly the first time I saw an audit presentation, there was this like thing about how there were I think it was like no significant issues was the line.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not hearing no significant issues this year, but it sounds like what you're saying is that the issues that did exist were process issues rather than content issues. Is that like, so it's sort of like, when there were no significant issues, and so this time there were, but I'm not seeing them like called out in quite the same, like.
Well,
way.
so I think what you're talking about is I didn't use the term significant deficiency or material weakness, which are kind of audit buzzwords, and we're not communicating, so we did have one management letter comment, which there's a hierarchy of these things that we communicate. So a material weakness is like, you better fix this now. A significant deficiency is less significant than that. And then a management letter comment is literally something that we're not required to put in writing, but we did because we think it's helpful to the library. So that's kind of how we categorize all that. So the fact that we're communicating the one issue that we did have as a management letter comment, which we could have left off entirely. So you don't have any of those kinds of issues.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, good.
Any other questions?
All right. Well, thank you for the report, and happy to receive another clean audit.
Yeah,
So
very good.
appreciate all of your work and all of your effort, and look forward to another one next year.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is a resolution to accept the 2022-2023 financial audit, which, do we have a resolution?
Yeah, page
right now?
33.
Yes, is on page 33 of the packet. And now I haven't been to a meeting in 2 months, and I'm forgetting do I read it and then ask for a motion?
I need to ask for the motion first.
Okay, ask for the motion, then I read it. Thank you for the refresher. Okay, can I have a motion for the resolution to accept the 2022-2023 financial audit?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. So now I read it and then we discuss? Okay. So the resolution is as, the board resolves as follows: to accept the 2022-2023 financial audit prepared by Yo&Yo CPAs, and that all resolutions and parts of resolutions that conflict with the provisions of this resolution are rescinded. So having that on the floor, any discussion, further discussion on the audit? All right, and this is not a roll call vote, so according to the agenda.
That's
So
correct.
all in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution passes. The next agenda item, which we already discussed during the executive committee update, so, but if we have another opportunity, if there are any other follow-up thoughts or questions. And if not, as a reminder, we have a vacancy to fill on the board. Any interested parties can email board@aadl.org, which will go to the entire board, a letter of interest. And the executive committee will review the applicants. I will meet with 2 to 3 of those applicants to discuss their interest, and then the executive committee will bring a recommendation to the January board meeting. Okay, if there's no further discussion of that, we can,
Oh, there's
Well-
one more
Oh.
piece of that, was just that hopefully we would
Oh.
also then vote on it in January.
yes, and to vote on it in January. And the letter should be sent to board@aadl.org by December 31st.
By the stroke of 11:59.
That's right.
Before the ball drops in Times Square.
Yeah.
Can I,
All
can I
right.
ask a question to executive? And it's,
Yeah.
and you can tell me to just email this, but I know one thing was that at some point we talked about, when we're talking about this role, like equity and within this, and because these are unpaid positions, like if there was a path to creating that, we might get different interest. Is that something that maybe executive would consider within the new year for the board members? Just thinking about like the applicant pool and who that might open up if we had that on the table versus not. And I
So
know that
is the
might not
question
be-
like considering making board positions a paid position?
Yeah,
We are allowed to do that
Yeah.
up to a certain amount. I think it's $50 a meeting or something like that in the bylaws. We have never, as far as to my knowledge, this board has never paid itself. But I think it's really simply a matter of making a proposal to do that. It's within the realm of our powers.
yeah.
It's interesting also to think about kind of the long arc of how people have thought about that. I can't see you, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Hi. About how people have thought about that, because it has, I think, historically on this board been thought about as a projection of care for taxpayer dollar, not to receive payment. And I think that we're really also coming to a different moment where lots of people, like unpaid labor of any kind does not really, does not feel or does not present or is in fact not equitable. Whether $50 is gonna move the needle, I don't know.
Well,
But I am also making the case for this in lots of areas of my professional life where I don't want to not pay people for their time, right?
yeah, I just think like maybe even considering it for the next election cycle, even if it's a little bit, I mean, $50 is still childcare for the night. It's still a lot of things. And, I just think because we want something that's reflective to the democracy, like who we serve, these are the steps to make towards that. And I think there's different ways to go about it, but I just want it to be considered.
Yeah, I think that's something that the executive committee can discuss, and it's something I've thought about, and I haven't brought it up. It hasn't been an urgent problem for me, but like I actually think it's something that's worth considering, because it is a time commitment, and a lot of people who might be able to commit that time can only do so if they get paid for the labor they're doing. So yeah, I think that's worth talking about as a committee, and then we can kind of see where it fits, and we can explore kind of what the range of options are too, because the bylaws might have a restriction, but we can also amend bylaws. So.
We sure can.
Thank you.
I do think just realistically from a timeline standpoint of filling the position, like we're not gonna figure that out
Yeah.
by January.
Right.
It's even worse than I
but I
thought.
think
It's
it's a great-
actually
like, I
30.
Oh,
It's
wow.
$30 a meeting.
Yeah, that's not even childcare these days.
No.
And whether that would cover committee meetings, I don't even know. But it is worth looking at, because when you think about that in the aggregate over the course of a year, it's
Yeah.
more meaningful, right?
It's at least a step forward. But yeah, maybe not for this position, obviously. I just thought it'd be a good time to raise it. And then, but like for the next election cycle, I just think that could open up, even if it's only like $30, that could still be incentivizing enough. Or it could just be like, this can cover X amount of childcare for the night,
Yeah.
And
'cause-
you'd also, anyone could decline to receive that
Oh,
payment
yeah,
too. So
absolutely.
there's still the option to choose your own adventure, and
Yeah.
it's not like we have to
Yeah.
report on that individually.
Yeah, no, I think that's, and I think making sure that process is, like, transparent, but also respecting, like, not having that be a process of shame for somebody that does need that money. And to clarify, like, I don't think childcare is the only cost, like, there's transportation, there's other things, but I know I said childcare like 9 times in a row, so I'm just saying, I know people don't have kids, I respect that.
Now in my brain, I'm going, what would I have made if I collected that money for 10 years?
You'd be rich. Think about that.
I'm rich in experience.
Okay, so that's something we'll consider. And Anna's point is, we won't. That won't happen before we appoint this position for the coming year, but to think about into the coming election cycle for sure. Okay, any other board replacement discussion?
I appreciate, Kat, you bringing that
Yeah.
up, because we haven't talked about that in a really long time, and we're very interested to hear what you all make of it in committee and how we might move forward.
Yeah, I never thought, I didn't even know that was an option.
Yeah. And it might be also worth looking and scanning and seeing what city council's doing, what the school board is doing. I have no idea.
Yeah, what other boards are doing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a big issue in American governance, just like period.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that suggestion, and we will move along to resolution of appreciation to Jamie Vanderbrook. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Thank you.
can I read this?
Please.
The board resolves as follows, that the Ann Arbor District Library Board would like to officially thank Jamie Vanderbrook for her 8 years of outstanding service as an Ann Arbor District Library Board of Trustee and her service as president of the board. That the Ann Arbor District Library would like to recognize Jamie Vanderbrook for her dedication, leadership, and commitment to the library, community, and staff, and that all resolutions and parts of resolutions that conflict with the provisions of this resolution are rescinded.
All right. Any discussion on the resolution?
We miss you already.
Yeah, I know. If you're watching.
I'm gonna send you the YouTube link.
I'll just reiterate, Jamie has been an incredible colleague and board member, and we served together for a long time. So, I wish her the best in her pursuits away from this board, and I am grateful for all of her contributions.
Yeah, I did miss the last meeting, but I will just say I'm grateful to have been able to serve with Jamie and for her perspective that she brought. And all of the years of experience and her work as a professional librarian and just her thoughtful and considerate kind of input and feedback on everything, all of the work the board did. It was a real privilege to work with her, and I am happy to call for a vote. All in favor of approving this resolution, say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Seeing no, that resolution is unanimously approved. And the final item of action is a vote to cancel the December 18th, 2023 regular board meeting. Is this a motion to approve?
Yes, I
or-
would just vote to, vote, there's not a resolution.
There's not a resolution. Okay, yeah.
I move to cancel the December 18th, 2023 regular board meeting.
Second.
Any discussion?
Let's do it.
We're able to do this, right, in terms of our timing and whatnot?
Yes.
Okay, great.
All right, great. All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Hearing nobody, the vote is approved. So we'll see you all in January. Do we have any citizens' comments?
I have not received any.
Okay, and seeing nobody, we will move right along to adjournment. See you all in the new year.